Okay, good morning and welcome to Sacramento. I think we'll get started here. So my name's Alan Hirsch. I am Chief Deputy Director for the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. Just do some housekeeping items first. If you need to use the restrooms during this hearing, they are basically out the door behind you and to your left. If in the unlikely event we have an emergency, the best way out of the building is to turn right outside of the room here, go down the stairs, and then exit the front entrance of the building. We tend to get a lot of fire drills in this building in spring, but it's still February, so the odds are low. And also, this hearing is being webcast. So if you'd like to alert a colleague about that, you can tell them to access the webcast at the Cal EPA website, www.calepa.ca.gov, and they can click on webcasts at the top of the page. So this is the time and place set for the presentation of comments orally or in writing regarding the request by the Resilient Floor Covering Institute for a Proposition 65 safe use determination for the use of diisononyl phthalate, also known as DINP, in vinyl flooring products. More specifically, the request to us is to determine that exposures to DINP in vinyl flooring products do not present significant cancer risks under Proposition 65 and therefore do not require a warning. OEHHA will take under submission all written comments and oral statements submitted or made during this hearing. The director of OEHHA has designated me as the hearing officer to conduct the hearing on his behalf, and the entire proceeding is being recorded by a certified court reporter. The transcript and all exhibits and evidence presented at this hearing will be included in the administrative record of this SUD request. Also, as a reminder, there has been a written public comment period on this request that will close at 5 p.m. today, February 25th. For organizational purposes, we request that those of you who wish to speak at the hearing complete a blue speaker's card. There's several on the table back there, though you're not required to do so. And just as a reminder, I want to make sure that you're aware that because this is a formal public hearing, we will essentially be in listening mode today. In addition to myself, there are several OEHHA staff people here who will be listening to what's said. Just briefly, our staff counsel, Fran Kammerer, is in the front row. Dr. Lauren Zeiss, our Deputy Director of Scientific Affairs, is here. Dr. Martha Sandy, who manages the Proposition 65 program, is here, and we have several other staff scientists who are definitely here to listen to what you have to say. But if you've been to pre-regulatory workshops that we've had in the recent past on things like our warning reg, you may have seen that at workshops we tend to engage in back and forth discussions, or you may have seen that also at meetings such as our carcinogen identification committee, where panel members often ask specific follow-up questions, or they may ask OEHHA staff to answer questions raised by commenters. But again, because this is a formal public hearing, we are basically here just in listening mode. So then, to enable the audience to hear you and to ensure that your comments are recorded for the record, you can come to the microphone over here to the left of me when you're called to speak, and it would be helpful to the court reporter if you state your name and and the organization that you represent. However, you're not required to do so. So at this time, I believe we have representatives from the Resilient Floor Covering Institute who are going to give a short presentation on their request.
How's that? Is that working? Okay, let me take two. Good morning, Mr. Hirsch, OEHHA officials, and members of the public. I am Bill Hall, a senior environmental partner with the law firm of Venable, LLP, and longtime counsel for the Resilient Floor Covering Institute. I thank you today for scheduling our public hearing for the RFCI request for a safe use determination dated November 26, 2014 for the presence of DINP in 4 vinyl flooring product categories: heterogeneous vinyl flooring, homogeneous vinyl flooring, vinyl tile, and vinyl composition tile. This hearing arises from OEHHA's acceptance in a letter dated December 19, 2014 of RFCI's SUD request as complete under Section 25204F of OEHHA's Prop 65 regulations. As a result, OEHHA has continuing authority to issue a final decision regarding our SUD request, even if a private enforcer issues a notice of violation. A favorable decision to grant RFCI's SUD request represents OEHHA's best judgment that a cancer warning is not required based on the presence of DINP in vinyl flooring, because exposure to DINP from those products is well below and below a no significant risk level for DINP. Our presentation today will explain the compelling scientific, technical, and policy basis for granting our SUD request. I will address a couple legal issues related to the SUD request. Then Dean Thompson, president of RFCI, will explain the vinyl flooring industry, the product categories at issue, their use of DINP, the substantial benefits of vinyl flooring, and the sustainability programs that RFCI has developed, including the extensive recycling of old vinyl flooring products and other PVC sources that often contain DINP. Then Dr. Michael Lakin, a renowned Prop 65 expert for the past 25 years and principal of Insight, will provide a detailed explanation of the comprehensive exposure assessment demonstrating that exposure to DINP from vinyl flooring in the highest exposure scenarios of an installer and a residence does not present a significant risk to human health and is dramatically below OEHHA's proposed NSRL for DINP. From a legal standpoint, RFCI is a trade association that qualifies to request this SUD because many of the member manufacturers use DINP as an intentionally added plasticizer to make the product flexible. And, as I mentioned before, DINP is often a constituent in the recycled source material that is used to manufacture new vinyl flooring. Thus, RFCI meets the requirements for a SUD applicant under Section 25204B3. Second, RFCI recognizes that OEHHA has issued a proposed NSRL for DINP of 146 micrograms per day. As demonstrated in our SUD request and related materials, and as will be presented today, the exposure to DINP in vinyl flooring is about 0.03 micrograms per day for the average professional installer and 1.1 micrograms per day for the average residential consumer. These exposure levels do not present a significant risk to human health as required for OEHHA's approval of a SUD and are dramatically below the proposed NSRL. However, RFCI does not take a position at this time on the appropriateness of the precise NSRL level proposed by OEHHA, but reserves the right to do so in the future. With those legal points addressed, I now introduce Dean Thompson, President of RFCI, for his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, all. It's a special pleasure to be here today because I flew out of Isolation in Georgia yesterday in time to avoid that disaster. So I'm thrilled to be here for that reason. I had the opportunity to meet some of you from OEHHA last December, and I want to thank you all for the work that you do, Alan, and your group. And my name is Dean Thompson. I'm president of the Resilient Floor Covering Institute. As Bill said, RFCI is a trade association of leading manufacturers of vinyl and rubber flooring products and suppliers of product ingredient raw materials and supporting products, including adhesives, underlayments, and underlayments for the North American market. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to describe the vinyl flooring industry, its sustainability programs, and the 4 vinyl flooring product categories for which RFCI seeks a safe use determination under Proposition 65 for the use of DINP as a plasticizer in these products. RFCI membership consists of 15 flooring manufacturers who represent over 95% of all resilient flooring manufactured and marketed throughout North America. In addition, there are 21 supply chain associate members who share a genuine commitment to improving the resilient flooring industry and to advancing sustainability. Vinyl flooring is manufactured using polyvinyl chloride, PVC, pigment plasticizers, fillers such as limestone, extenders, and stabilizers to protect against heat and light degradation. RFCI manufacturing members produce a number of new vinyl flooring products using recycled, flexible PVC material. As was found by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, at least 99% of the raw materials initially used in vinyl flooring manufacturing ultimately end up in the finished products, which means there is minimal waste in the manufacturing process. Further, the amount of recycled content in the finished products, when scrap material is considered, ranges from 12% to 50%. Many of the flooring manufacturers have take-back programs from their major customers to facilitate the recycling of old materials. This industry best practice has the substantial benefit of reducing the amount of vinyl flooring sent to landfills and helping California achieve its statewide recycling goal of 75% by 2020. DINP is a plasticizer that is used to make the PVC soft and flexible and imparts resilience, comfort, and bounce to the flooring product. DINP is widely used in vinyl flooring because of its relatively low volatility and immobility in the PVC matrix and its compatibility with the manufacturing process for these products. Vinyl flooring provides substantial health, environmental, safety, and performance benefits because it is durable, long-lasting, and easily cleaned and maintained. It well withstands the rigors of harsh cleaning in healthcare environments for complete sanitation. Thus, it is ideal to be used in school classrooms, cafeterias, hospitals, and kitchens. Vinyl flooring boasts superior flame retardant and smoke suppressant attributes and outstanding durability. It can last well over 30 years, all at relatively low cost. The same National Institute of Standards and Technology study I mentioned before found that vinyl composition tile has lower environmental and health impacts than 12 flooring alternatives, including non-vinyl products such as linoleum and ceramic tile with recycled glass. The superior performance of vinyl flooring makes it one of the top choices for hard surface flooring, which constituting 12.1% of the total U.S. floor covering market in sales in 2013. These products are used extensively in residential, healthcare, and educational environments, plus other commercial and institutional buildings. They are installed by flooring professionals who handle and install other flooring products such as carpet, laminate, wood, and do-it-yourself individuals. RFCI and its members are market leaders in ensuring the products are safe and effective, and that their environmental impacts and product ingredients are transparently communicated. 4 RFCI developed sustainability and environmental certification programs establish the resilient flooring industry as being environmentally responsible. Several of these programs are relied upon by your sister California agencies. First Floor Score is a program that independently certifies flooring products as complying with California Sections 1350 indoor air quality requirements for VOCs. Floor Score certified products are eligible to receive points under California's Collaborative for High Performance Schools, sometimes called CHIPS, California Green Building Requirements, and U.S. Green Building Council's LEED program, among a number of others. Second, the NSF ANSI 332 Sustainability Assessment Standard for Resilient Floor Coverings is an intentionally accepted standard for, an internationally accepted standard, for evaluating and certifying the sustainability of resilient flooring products across their entire product life cycle based on product design, product manufacturing, long-term value, end-of-life management, corporate governance, and innovation. Third is the RFCI Environmental Product Declaration Program. It covers 5 product categories and provides transparent information on the raw materials, production, and life cycle environmental impacts of vinyl flooring products. As I will explain, 4 of the EPD product categories are subject to our safe use determination request. Finally, RFCI's Product Transparency Declaration Program, PTD, discloses intentionally added ingredients that appear on its widely recognized list, including California's Proposition 65 list, and indicates whether the ingredient level triggers an exposure warning notification. Manufacturers also identify whether the product complies with the VOC emissions testing, including California Specification 1350 and other California program requirements. The 4 categories of vinyl flooring subject to the request are heterogeneous vinyl flooring, homogeneous vinyl flooring, vinyl tile, and vinyl composition tile. The first 2 product categories are sheet vinyl flooring products that are manufactured in rolls typically 6 feet or 12 feet wide. The vinyl tile category is manufactured in a variety of size formats, including squares, rectangles, and planks. And vinyl composition tiles are typically 1 square foot in size. The construction and comparison of each product category, including the amount of DINP and other plasticizers, differs to a degree. The relevant features for our safe use determination request are among the categories heterogeneous and homogeneous vinyl flooring have the highest DINP average of about 15.6% by product mass, with a heterogeneous product containing the highest DINP content of 22%. Heterogeneous vinyl flooring and vinyl tile are multi-layered products that include a top wear layer. This wear layer often is comprised of urethane or acrylate coating, which contains no plasticizer and prevents DINP migration to the top of the product. Other products within these categories have a top wear layer consisting of clear vinyl containing some plasticizer, with a minimum DINP percentage of only 4.7% in the heterogeneous wear layer and 1.6% in the vinyl tile wear layer. Homogeneous sheet vinyl, while consisting of a uniform single layer, often has a high performance coating applied to the surface. Vinyl composition tile does not have a wear layer, but typically contains less than 1% DINP. As Dr. Lakin will explain, using very conservative assumptions, the exposure to DINP from any of the 4 categories of vinyl flooring is extremely low and dramatically below the proposed NSRL for DINP. RFCI strongly believes that using the requested safe use determination will achieve Governor Brown's Proposition 65 reform objectives by avoiding a confusing and misplaced danger warning for vinyl flooring and delivering unwarranted Proposition 65 private enforcers lawsuits, which often cost undeserving targeted companies well over $100,000 to resolve. Moreover, a DINP safe use determination will allow the industry to continue the use of recycled vinyl source material containing DINP in new vinyl flooring products without the fear of a potential lawsuit. This outcome will help California achieve its laudable 2020 recycling goal of 75%. Overall, based on rigorous scientific and risk assessment, your issuance of the requested safe use determination will avoid stigmatizing the use of vinyl flooring products that advance so many of California's sustainability objectives. Thank you again for the opportunity to present RFCI's views on this very important safe use determination request. And I'll turn this over to Dr. Lakin, our Proposition 65 expert, to explain his information. Mike? Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Good morning, everybody. We'll walk through some science here, get people awake in the morning. I'm going to try and be fairly precise and abbreviated in the way we talk about this today. That's because we go through all the details. We'd be here for most of the day talking about it. The RFCI submitted a request for safe use determination for 4 general types of vinyl flooring, which contain DINP. Dean was walking through each of those products and their composition. But to simplify things, we decided we're going to take all those tiles and make them all the same. We're going to assume there's no wear layer or no surface layer that would prevent the migration of DINP out of the tiles, just for purposes of the assessment. We're also assuming that the DINP is present throughout the entire width of the tile, not in the base layers or the back layers or somewhere in the middle, but uniform throughout. So there's no barrier to the release out the top of the tile. So that's our preliminary assumptions going into the assessment. And that we think will help us ensure that our evaluation does not underestimate the risk. The first step in our evaluation was to understand the composition and the use of the product. It's based on the understanding of the composition that we made those first initial simplifying assumptions to ensure that we're going to be conservative in our assessment. The use information told us how to go about doing the evaluation. We understand these products are simply a carpeting type material that's put into the house, or a flooring material. So we assume that under a worst case, it might be in the home for 70 years and used by the same family for 70 years, creating the longest possible exposure. And we also assumed that a second exposure pathway would be during the installation of the product. That's when it would be handled most extensively. And a professional installer would handle it day in and day out. A homeowner or do-it-yourself person might only install it one time or twice. And we really couldn't have somebody both install it and live in the house for 70 years because then they'd been a neonate when they were installing the tile. So for a practical purpose, we had to break those two apart. And those are the 2 exposure scenarios that we looked at. For both of those 2 exposure scenarios, we had 2 pathways, routes of exposure. One was dermal contact. Actually 3 routes of exposure. The second was incidental ingestion, hand-to-mouth contact after you touch the product, and inhalation. DINP is a semi-volatile. It does not put very much material into the air, but nonetheless, it will release some material over time. So we took a look at that to see how much would come up and whether that would pose a risk as well. After evaluating all 3 pathways, we summed them to get a total, and that was the risk that we were presenting. The risk to the installer that we calculated was about 0.03 micrograms per day. The typical homeowner had a daily exposure, lifetime average daily exposure of 1.1 micrograms per day. And the proposed NSRL, or safe harbor exposure limit, is 146 micrograms per day. So we're around 130 times below or greater for the 2 exposure scenarios. To do this assessment, we had to make some assumptions about the general exposure parameters that each of those two groups of people, each of the two receptors would be, that would characterize them in a conservative manner. The assumptions we made for the professional installers included that the average installer works 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year. And based on some information from the California Contractors Licensing Board, looking at a master labor agreement that was in place in California with the trade union from California, talking to some of the members of the trade unions, we decided that we would use OEHHA's recently proposed 25-year typical career from their stochastic guidelines. And it seems to match pretty well with what we hear back from the industry, that there's a pretty high turnover rate of new employees. It's a fairly difficult job, labor intensive. And after a number of years in the profession, most people are promoted to a non-labor type job, non-installation job, estimating or doing something or sales. So we thought 25 years is a reasonable time frame to have somebody continuously installing this flooring product. Now in California, traditional floor covering contractors and installers are covered by a C15 contractor's license, and that allows them to install a variety of materials besides just resilient flooring. They can install rubber, cork, other plastics, bamboo, linoleum, bitumen back tiles, resilient tiles, carpeting, wood, and laminate flooring. So they're not full-time doing this one job. And we decided that the best way to understand what their percentage of time they would spend installing these products is to look at the market share that we had. And this product line has about a 15% market share. So we assumed that that would be the percent of their time that they'd be installing this product versus one of the other flooring products. For dermal exposure, we assume that the typical installer would touch the product to the palmar sides of their hands, which from the interpretive guidance is 420 square centimeters, during the installation. The transfer of DINP to the hands during the handling was determined by a study by Toning, who determined that you transfer on average 0.007 micrograms per square centimeter per hour. So we had the worker actually installing tiles for 4 hours a day based on the work habits that was described by the union contracts. We had them, the whole palm surface of their hand being exposed. And we used that as the basis for the transfer of DINP to the workers. The absorption rate from the hands was determined by a study by Diisononyl and Phthalate, who determined that DEHP is absorbed at about a 17.2% rate, and that was work done by Diisononyl. The study by Phthalate said that the DEHP is about 10 times better absorbed than DINP. So the combination of those two gave us a 1.7% absorption rate from the DEHP on the skin. Other studies by Scott and Mintz found that rat skin is much more, absorbs phthalates at a much better rate than human skin, about 2 to 10 times better, but we opted not to use that scaling factor in our calculations. Again, periodically we wanted to take some factors out to make sure we were being conservative in our assessment. So we did not include that. What the data indicate is the absorption is about 1.72% per hour per 24-hour period of the amount of DINP on the skin. We assume that that absorption amount occurred in 4 hours when they were handling the tile. Incidental ingestion occurs after you get material on your hand if you tip the hand into your mouth. And that transfer we assumed was occurring at based on the average concentration on the skin per surface area. We assume that 19 square centimeters of your skin would be mouthed 6.5 times an hour during the 4-hour period that they were working on the job. We went back, we've been doing some recent work looking at how large that area is, and it's pretty remarkable. 19.5 square centimeters, when you lay a chart over your hand, appears to cover the better part of 2 fingers. So again, we were looking at that just to make sure that we were being conservative in our assessment, and having looked at a few hours of tape of people exhibiting this behavior, that's a significant amount for that type of incidental contact. A lady by the name of Melanie Gorman-Ing has recently done some work showing that about 6.5% of the material on the hand is transferred to the lips or mouth during a contact event, and we use that transfer rate in our study. To evaluate inhalation, we had to figure a way to measure the concentration of DINP in the air. Such low amounts of DINP are released into the air, and it is so quickly absorbed and bound to dust particulate or other materials that it's very difficult to actually go out and measure it. A study by Zhu and Liang just came out last year, 2014, where they were able to generate some measurements of the DINP volatilization rate in a special chamber they had constructed that eliminated most of the side areas where the DINP could bind as it's being released. Therefore, you reach the steady state concentration more quickly. Once you reach the steady state concentration, you could actually measure, they could actually measure the DINP in the air. In the real world, looking at houses or other environments like that, they've estimated it takes between 60 and 180 days, half a year to a year and a half to reach steady state, depending on how much dust is in the house and how often the dust is being stirred up and how many air exchange rates you have in the house. In a typical house where people are vacuuming, according to EPA, several times a week, that's not my house, but they claim that's an average. But even once or twice a month is sufficient to remove the DINP-laden dust, and the DINP process of reaching steady state has to start all over again, binding to all those possible locations. So we took the limited data, or the data looking at the volatilization rate, and calculated a steady state concentration by applying that to a simple box model. So we made the assumption that even though it takes a long period of time for that to occur, that would occur almost instantaneously. For instance, for the workers who would be having to have that level occur during the time they're installing it in that house. In that matter, we were able to establish an air concentration, and from the air concentration, we could calculate an exposure based on an inhalation rate of 10 cubic meters of air per day. From that information, we were able to estimate the exposure to the worker from the three various routes of exposure. This represents a 0.15 microgram per day exposure from inhalation, a 0.007 microgram per day exposure from dermal absorption, and 0.008 micrograms per day from ingestion. That totals about 0.03 micrograms per day for the worker over the course of his 25-year, over the course of a 70-year lifetime. Now that was a fairly straightforward calculation compared to looking at workers or residents, because the resident isn't a static person. They start as a child and they grow, and so their exposure parameters change every year. And almost all the parameters we were looking at have growth has some effect on those parameters. So we looked at basically a person in the house for 70 years, and for the first 21 years, we had to adjust all the parameters on a yearly basis. Where we didn't have parameters for every year but had them for a range, we simply installed that value for the entire range that we had the information for. We can show you some of that type of information in some of these slides. And that just shows that when we had to look at hand-to-mouth information, we had to find the contact rates that went from age 1 up to 70. If we looked at surface area of various body parts to look at hand-to-mouth contact, we found we had different, oops, okay. Let's see, go down to, get it to do the show, that should work, there you go. There we go. Okay. So you can see when we developed this, we had certain age ranges that we had data for. For instance, we had one value for ages 4 to 6. And we simply implied that in the three in each age bracket. When we looked at different data, as in the next slide, go one more. Okay, we may have lost in there, but this will work. In this slide, we're seeing the amount of time people spend in a room based on their age. And each of those rooms were the rooms where we thought vinyl flooring would be installed. So the entire time they were in the room, we assumed they were exhibiting a behavior that had them on the floor. and contacting the floor in some way. So for each age bracket, we assigned some kind of behavior that was representative of what that age person would do. So for a baby or 0 to 1-year-old child, we had them on the floor on their stomach for the whole hour. And we took that side of their body to calculate their exposure. Or as they got older, we had them sitting up. Ultimately, as an adult, we had them walking barefoot for most of the time in the room. And you can see we have different amounts of time in the room for the various age groups. Next slide. Okay, this shows the changes in body surface area as the ages change. And again, as you go from younger, you see most of the boxes are filled as you're young because you're on the floor and contacting most of the body surface area. By the time you're an adult, we have the bottom of the feet contacting the floor. But we did assume that in each of these cases, the person is also contacting the floor with their hands to allow us to have a way to calculate ingestion exposures. So in each of these places, each of these calculations, we added to that that one hand was on the surface of the floor and was completely in contact to have DINP present on it. So we built a matrix and had each of these filling in a column and pulled from each of the rows to pull out the exposures based on the different pathways. So the next slide. So this is showing the time spent indoors in the home, which we use to get inhalation rate or inhalation amount. Again, we assume that the steady state concentration of the DINP was constantly there while they were at home. And this is the total amount of time spent in the home. And that was multiplied by the inhalation rate that again is age specific to get a total amount of exposure. Go to the last slide up there. And this is just the sum of each of the pathways that we looked at. The dermal exposure pathway, we use the same absorption rate constants that we did for the worker. Studies by Toning, Diisinger, and Elise. And the total dermal exposure risk to the resident user over 70 years was 1.3 micrograms per day. And these are all lifetime average daily doses. Inhalation exposure based on the time spent in the room indoors with an assumption of breathing at an age-adjusted breathing rate from the stochastic guidance results in a 0.93 microgram per day exposure level for the resident user. The ingestion exposure, again, we had, regardless of their orientation on the floor, we had their hands in contact with the floor, so it had material that they could put in their mouth. You saw the contact rates that we had for each of the age groups. Those were per hour. So as a young person, we were up to 24 contacts an hour and for whatever period of time they're in the room. And sum that to get the ingestion rate, which the exposure by ingestion was 0.24 micrograms per day. Adding the three routes of exposure, we find the lifetime average daily dose to be about 1.1 for the resident user and about 0.3 micrograms per day for the worker. Thank you.
Okay, so oh, did you want to wrap up? Sure.
Once again, I want to thank OEHHA for the opportunity to make this public presentation today. I want to reiterate our continuing interest and willingness to work with you to answer any further questions you may have, and that we believe we have a very compelling case for the issuance of a SUD in this situation. I just also want to reiterate that I think a SUD in this situation really fits into Governor Brown's efforts to improve the public health and warning requirements of Prop 65, which I know OEHHA is very involved in attempting to further, and that it will do so by ensuring that warning decisions under Prop 65 will be based on sound science, sound exposure assessments, instead of the threat of Prop 65 bounty hunter litigation, which you know is extremely expensive and occurs often in situations that even Governor Brown has acknowledged are not appropriate. And the other very important policy benefit of a SUD acceptance and approval in this situation in that it will continue to allow the vinyl flooring industry to recycle using source materials that do contain some DINP, but not nearly in an amount that would come close to presenting a significant risk. So again, I thank you, look forward to working with you, and hopefully receiving a SUD in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So this is the time for anyone else who would like to comment. I don't have any blue cards, but that's okay. If anyone would like to comment, this is the time to come up to the microphone and do it. Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, so hearing no additional speaking requests, I hereby close this public hearing. And again, our office will accept written public comments until 5 p.m. this afternoon. The easiest way to submit comments is to email them to us at p65public.comments@oehha.ca.gov. Maybe a little late to drop them in the mail, but our mailing address is Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, 1001 I Street, 19th floor, mail stop 19B, Sacramento, 95814. And again, I hereby close the hearing, and thank you very much.